Hey there, everyone. This is Samuel Johnson, and welcome back to the Phantom Perspectives. And today we're going to be discussing episode 44 of Danny Phantom Urban Jungle. And, a nice little touch up from last week. This is actually a pretty good episode. Not a great one, admittedly, but pretty good one. And why is this? Well, let's first talk about the plot. In this case, we're introduced to another new villain. Only, unlike Amorpha, who just flat out sucked, this one is actually a good one. This is a giant plant ghost called Undergrowth. He's also voiced by Mark Hamill, which is an immediate plus, and pretty much he's like one of those eco warriors. He's like a fanatical eco warrior on crack. Actually, I think a better example would be Swamp Thing if he decided to be evil, which pretty much is what's going on. He manages to uproot himself, or not really uproot. I don't really. He manages to grow anyway, and he starts encompassing the entirety of Amity Park in his vines. And so, of course, Danny tries fighting him, but Danny is dealing with two problems at the moment. Problem number one: he's suddenly come down with something. It doesn't know what he doesn't know what it is, but apparently, ever since he woke up that morning, he's just been freezing. He doesn't know what. He doesn't know how. But even in like 95 degree, but even in a temperature of 95 degrees, it's like he's out in the middle of the cold with only a sweatshirt on. As a, but as such, he's just kind of shivering and he's shivering and at certain points he seems to the cold seems to get the better of him. And on top of that, even if he does manage to get over it when he's fighting Undergrowth can regenerate because he's made of plants. His entire thing is that he can pretty much regrow any part of him that gets chopped off. And pretty much what's going on is that, like I said, because he's the eco warrior type plant, he wants to pretty much encompass the entire earth in his plants because he thinks humanity is mistreating his children. So as such, he just pretty much decides, screw it, gonna kill him off and just make the planet green again, and make the planet green. As such, again, Danny tries fighting him, but ultimately Danny is defeated, and Tucker, and Sam are all ensnared in vines and knocked out with pollen. When Danny and Tucker wake up, they find themselves tied up to a tree with vines that are able to suppress Danny's powers. But from there, it turns out that ever since they've been unconscious, Undergrowth has pretty much been growing, I suppose. He's been able to spread his vines all over Amity Park, and rather than kill all the humans in Amity Park, well, at least at first, he connects up to something called a mind plant or mind root or something. Pretty much what it does, that it directly jacks into someone and pretty much gives Undergrowth complete control of them. As such, Undergrowth is using the various citizens of Amity Park to pretty much just tear the place down and plant his children, and because of his ghost powers, they're growing rapidly, and pretty much his plan. And like I said, he just wants to spread this all out across Amity Park, and of course Danny wants to stop him, but as another little added bit of what the hell, it turns out that Undergrowth also attached Sam to this route. But unlike the other people who are meant to just be kind of like worker drones, that they're just expendable and they're just there to destroy everything and then be gotten rid of when they're done, Sam has pretty much been turned into the plant queen. And the reason for this is because she already cared for plants and kept them in safe because she was eco-friendly. But now she's pretty much become Undergrowth's right hand. And of course, obviously, the mind plants are what's controlling her, but it's actually legitimately creepy when you see her because her clothes are now been replaced with these weird green clothes, and Sam's voice actress really does a good job of making her just sound terrifying and threatening. Like her voice is now lower and more cold, but yet warm and welcoming. It's kind of like if you step into a haunted mansion and there's this guy there that says, "Welcome to my mansion. Make yourself at home." Like it's kind of like that, and it's actually legitimately creepy to see. And things just continue to get worse when Undergrowth jacks Tucker up, Danny's parents, because ghosts, they're going to be there. So pretty much all that's left is Danny, and even then his powers are not helping him. He's pretty much kind of screwed. So it looks like he's pretty much screwed until the cold in his body starts up. And something that they showed a little earlier is that, because earlier Danny and Tucker went to a greenhouse that Sam had, and when Danny walked out, the cold emanating from Danny's body managed to actually freeze one of Sam's plants. And so just as the vines are ensnaring Danny, suddenly the cold starts up and he actually manages to break free of the vines and tries escaping. Unfortunately, though, Undergrowth has kind of spread himself so far over Amity Park that no matter where Danny goes, Undergrowth is there. So Danny thinks that he needs to find a way to get out of here, but no matter where he is, Undergrowth seems to follow. And on top of that, even Sam is coming after Danny. And of course, Danny is not going to hurt Sam because she's still his friend. But eventually, he manages to make it to Fenton Works and goes to the basement to try and get into the ghost zone. Though again, the cold is still getting the better of him, and it's resulting in it's pretty much resulting in his mobility and his powers and just everything kind of failing. However, Sam tries to use this to try and Sam does try and head him off before he gets into the ghost zone, but Danny says that he promises that he'll come back and save her, and so he phases through her and enters the ghost zone. As such, Danny's plan is to try and find Frostbite and ask what the heck's going on. And while he does manage to find him, unfortunately because of the cold, he just kind of crashes into his domain. Thankfully, Frostbite does find him, and they do get Danny to a chamber of theirs. Pretty much a de-chilling chamber, as they call it. It's pretty much a science facility with a tube in it that's supposed to level out Danny's natural body heat. And what's also funny is that apparently they stripped Danny down to his undies because of all the brambles and so forth that were in his suit. And so Frostbite asks Danny what the heck's going on, and so Danny says that something's been going on, that Amity Park's been overrun by Undergrowth, and Frostbite does know who Undergrowth is because apparently he has logs on that sort of thing. But Danny says that he doesn't really remember that much about what happened in Amity Park after the cold took him over, to which Frostbite actually explains what's going on with Danny. And I guess at this point, you can probably guess it, considering that he was able to actually freeze these people. But it turns out that the cold is actually a new ghost power. One that Danny's actually been kind of manifesting a little ever since he got it. Like, at the center of Danny's being is this power that unfortunately he hasn't been able to fully utilize. But it has manifested every time that he sensed a ghost nearby, hence the cold breath whenever Danny's ghost sense goes off. Now, someone who has seen the whole show up to this point does make me wonder, like, is this a thing now? Because we've seen other people do this too. I know Danielle has done it once. Dark Danny kind of had a variation with the red mist. Is that like the opposite thing? Does he have like a fire power that he hasn't utilized, or actually does he? Did Dark Danny have this cold power? What about Vlad? Does he have it too? I don't know. I don't know, so I can't really talk about that. But Frostbite does tell Danny that because it is still a new ghost power, and Frostbite and his people actually do have this power. So Frostbite volunteers to help. So Danny asks Frostbite to help him, and so Frostbite agrees. And another thing I'll comment this episode on is Frostbite. This is one of the things that I didn't get into this much with the last time we saw him because it kind of felt a little weird with how he was. But seeing him and Danny interact more, I like Frostbite in this episode. He's just really dang charming, too. Like, he seems all upbeat and jovial. He seems very willing to help Danny. He has actually got quite a few funny lines here and there. And as he's training Danny in how to use his new power, he's completely okay. He knows that Danny, despite what Danny's screw-ups, because Danny does screw up a bit here and there and at the expense of Frostbite's people, Frostbite is still very patient with him and is still very much enthusiastic about helping him to control his power, even though the rest of his people want Danny gone as fast as possible just so that they stop getting hurt, which I did actually find funny. In fact, I'm like in one scene when Danny's training with his new ice power, they try their variant of skeet shooting. So when it's Danny's turn, he doesn't blast in time, and so it circles back to the crowd. So Danny tries blasting it with the ice power, and not only does he miss the skeet, but he freezes the entire audience. And so Frostbite's response is, "Well, great. Now we're not going to sell any snacks," which I don't know. It just seems kind of weird. It's so weird. It's actually kind of funny, and I love it. But Danny eventually does get enough training, and so he tells Frostbite, and so he says that he's got to go back and free Amity Park from Undergrowth, which Frostbite completely understands. So Danny leaves and manages to go back through the ghost portal, but by the time he comes back, it looks like all of Amity Park has pretty much been covered in Undergrowth's vines, and all the people that Undergrowth has turned into his drones are now being slowly turned into plant food. So Danny needs to, of course, work fast. He does manage to find Sam, who now is wearing this full weird plant dress with these weird horns. Kind of makes her look a little bit like Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty, but with plants. But as Danny says that he's going to try and stop this, Undergrowth makes his presence known, and he starts attacking Danny. And unfortunately, Danny almost he's still trying to learn he's still having trouble with the ice power. So Undergrowth is actually able to beat him, and Sam is able to provide the extra assistance by ensnaring Danny in vines and pulling him under. But before they can start turning him into plant food, Danny manages to try and tap into the ice power again, and manages to completely break through the vines. And I kind of like the idea with cold air, it's the cold that gets rid of the plants, because too much cold air will hurt a plant, and since Danny's cold powers are pretty much working like that, they can actually do it. And yeah, it's convenient, I know, but still. I know it's supposed to be kind of convenient, and that kind of helps with the pacing issue I'll talk about later. But Danny actually does manage to use his ghost power to start blasting all of Undergrowth's things, and as more of Undergrowth's vines are destroyed, he starts diminishing until finally Danny is able to fight him on a more even keel, and eventually manages to destroy him by creating a snowball, filling it up with ecto energy and blasting it at Undergrowth, so that when it destroys Undergrowth's chest and he regenerates, the cold actually manages to completely tear apart his body, and he's ultimately destroyed, causing all of the vines throughout Amity Park to just start to shrivel up and die, and freeing everybody that he had under control or was in the plant pods, including Sam. The episode then ends with Danny kind of making a little ice crystal for Sam. It's really nice, but then it kind of goes into a dumb joke when Tucker apparently pulls a giant lawnmower out of his ass, and he offers to mow everyone's lawn for $5,000 each. Though he does manage to just chop down Undergrowth before he can grow back, so that's a plus, I suppose. I don't know. That's a dumb ending, but the episode itself, as I said, pretty good. It's not great, mind you, but there's a lot to like about it, too. I think my biggest problem with it is just kind of the pacing. The entire episode feels a bit rushed, if that makes any sense. It feels a little rushed. Not enough to take me out of the story, but enough so that it feels like enough to kind of be noticeable. And on top of that, the entire ice thing and the ice, but fighting the plants it does feel a little too convenient for the sake of the plot. So that's kind of a big fault, but I think the rest of the episode more than makes up for these faults. For starters, Undergrowth, I think, is actually a pretty good and actually legitimately threatening villain. It helps that Mark Hamill brings his A game for this role, and it shows he's threatening, he sounds terrifying as it, and the way Undergrowth spreads, it really is genuinely disturbing. Because everything he does just keeps growing and growing, and he keeps getting more and more powerful. Seeing him actually taking control of all of Amity Park and turning them into his own mindless zombies to start tearing everything down, even hearing his plan, it all actually does. It's all really disturbing and just kind of creepy to behold in its own regard. And seeing Sam be taken over by Undergrowth, I think is actually makes it legitimately threatening. Sam's voice actress really does help carry a sense of gravitas and just general disturbingness when you see Sam control, and just kind of seeing her continually trying to beckon Danny to give in or join them and whatever. It actually kind of makes you feel just more afraid of them, and to see Undergrowth. On top of that, when you actually see Undergrowth as he's getting more powerful, it does start making you feel like this guy is a very big threat. As he actually does manage to completely encompass Amity Park to the point where if Danny didn't have his ice power, he probably would have lost here. He actually might have lost in the end of the day. The only reason he didn't was because he just happened to get this power at the right time. And speaking of which, I like, again, this is something that I've been this is actually something I like. Seeing Danny learn more about his powers. Something, again, with you have superhero stories where the superhero is young and up and coming, or just kind of a kid when they get their powers, or hell, even when you see them starting out. It's something I like. It's seeing them learning more about their abilities. And I like seeing Danny trying to master his ice power. And something I like is that when it starts manifesting, Danny, again, doesn't have complete control over it, as it's radically cooling Danny's body to the point where he's freezing and can barely, and it just keeps getting worse and worse to the point where he almost passes out. Actually, scratch that, he does pass out. That's how Frostbite finds him. But to actually kind of see, but I do like seeing him manifested. Yeah, how them explaining how he's had this power all along does kind of open some minor plot holes if you try and stop and think about it. Because again, like, does everyone else have this power too? Like, I don't know if Vlad has a ghost sense. We might have seen him have it at one point. I don't remember. But I know for a fact that we've seen Danielle with it. So does she have this power too? Does she need to learn to manifest it? And like, what about Dark Danny? Like, I don't know. Like, maybe he had the power too and learned to use it, but we never saw him use it. But if Danny's ghost sense, the mist that came out of his mouth whenever a ghost was nearby, was a manifestation of this ice power, and then what about the red mist that came out of Dark Danny's nose when Danny was nearby? And was that a ghost power? What about Paulina when she was infected with Spectra's ghost bug? Does that mean she had the ice power too, and does that mean she had the ice power too at some point, and she just needed to learn how to manifest it? I don't know. It kind of raises a bit of questions when you tie it to that, but again, it doesn't ruin my overall enjoyment of it, and it is kind of funny seeing Danny learn how to master it, and it actually is legitimately awesome when he actually does learn to control it and fight back against Undergrowth, which I actually thought was really cool and a really kick-ass moment, especially since you saw how powerful Undergrowth was and how his minds could seem to counter almost every one of Danny's powers in some way. So I thought that was cool, and I legitimately liked it. So, again, I think the biggest problems with the episode are just kind of the pacing and just kind of some of the general convenience with this episode. Again, the pacing is a bit too fast. Like, Undergrowth takes control of Andy Park a bit too quickly. Danny, I think, learns to gain his control of his powers a little too quickly. And even when Danny does learn to master it, it does kind of become a bit of a curb stomp battle between Danny and Undergrowth. But again, it is still kind of cool seeing Danny actually start to beat back this thing that was probably a very big threat to him, and so it's a little cathartic there. But again, that's a problem. And again, there's still the narrative convenience of having him get this power just the right time, just to face this villain. So that is kind of a problem. Both of those are kind of problems with the episode. But compared to what I think I liked about this episode, I think they're minor. I think they're probably can be ignored. I can probably looked over. And again, on the whole, I think this is a pretty good episode. Not a great episode, because again, pacing issues, convenience, and even the ice powers and how they try to explain how Danny got them kind of does raise some questions about other stuff in the series. But I think the rest of the episode really does make up for it. Undergrowth's a lot of fun. Seeing him kind of grow in power, I suppose, no pun intended, does look legitimately disturbing and threatening. Seeing Sam do this is nice, and it is cool seeing Frostbite again, which I do actually kind of like, and they do and I like that they did actually follow up on that line from Infinite Realms where Frostbite says that that Danny is more in common with them than he knows, because apparently the last time Danny ran into Frostbite sensed the cold power within Danny. So yeah, just on the whole, a pretty good episode. Not great, but still decent and enjoyable. So yeah, was actually a good episode. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and tune in next week as we get to the final disc of the Danny Phantom complete series collection, and we get kind of into the final lap of the Danny Phantom series. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week. Take care.